I mean, my whole career I've been working with the Kundalini, and that started, well, I was doing a bit of massage and healing, but really I was just a stoned hippie. And I was coming, I'd done drugs from an early age and was coming to a point where I was totally schizophrenic and had to get out or die. And I was lying on my bed, and I was quite, well, very stoned, and I was really paranoid. I was just lying there being really paranoid, and all these terrible things were going to happen. And I just did myself, I thought there must be a way of somehow getting out of this paranoia. And somehow I did. I found a place in myself where it wasn't affecting me. And as soon as I got there, and I had no idea what it was, this rush of energy came up through my spine, and my whole brain just went pop. And it sounded like a light bulb when it blows up. It goes that pop and goes out. And this bright light, I could see all around the inside of my brain. And because I was so stoned, I thought, well, there goes another million brain cells. And then this big rush happened again, and it's another pop. And then about 2 weeks after that, I was on the road hitchhiking, and I got involved on a bus who were macrobiotic people, and then I got into meditation. I ended up in India. But I've always enjoyed, and always everything I've done has been that energy going through the spine. And then about 6 years, and it was always this rush and pop and release, and it was always exciting. Then about 5 years ago, it didn't stop. It just kept going. I had a Kundalini Awakening, and when that happens, everything changes forever. You can never be the same again. For me, it was really a terrifying experience. It was about, I still can't socialize, but it was about 6 to 8 months before I even tried doing a session again. And I can do sessions okay. But I knew at that point that I would be spending the rest of my life integrating and being with that energy. Because people say, oh, don't worry, you'll come down. And I knew I wouldn't. I knew I'd opened a door that doesn't shut. And in a way, the whole door and room and everything disappears anyway. And I didn't want to teach holographic breathing for a long time, because I thought, if that's going to do this to people, I can't take responsibility for that. I can't handle it myself, let alone let somebody else go through it. And then as I started, you don't really come down from it. It just carries on getting stronger, but you become used to it. Then after a while you enjoy it. It's like being on LSD all the time. Except it's real. It's the only difference. And as I started becoming used to it, I thought, well, it may be hard, but actually this is something that will change the human race. You know, you wouldn't do bad things anymore. You just wouldn't be capable of doing anything. And I started realizing, well, actually this won't happen to many people. It will just start wherever they are in their process. And if it's meant to happen in that way to someone, it's going to happen anyway. So I thought, well, okay, that's great. I'll go back to teaching the holographic breathing, and I will incorporate that experience into it, and I will help people open up through that experience. So they're having little glimpses of the energy working in that way, and then they can work with it themselves. For me, I always loved that experience of ended up where I've ended up. But I do include that now in teaching this. Yeah. So and most people who come along seem to want that and seem to enjoy feeling the energies releasing through the brain, feeling the energies going home. And for me, before it does that, you just seem to be going around in a circle. You maybe get used to the karma, you may be released, but I guess they call it the Wheel of Dharma or something. It just keeps on going round. When it goes through the brain and carries on going through the brain, you can no longer be the person you were before, and that wheel is no longer in operation the way it was before, and you start processing stuff that you were never processing before, and it doesn't stop, and it releases home. So it's kind of balancing, because it's, you know, before that we are an individual and it kind of stops here, but as soon as this is going through and this opens up, you're no longer an individual and you're connected to something much bigger that is also you. And with the holographic breathing, for me, once holographic breathing started, it never stopped. It just started, and unless I'm speaking or unless I'm eating, I'm doing holographic breathing. It was like I'd done it in a past life, and it just awoke. And as I'm teaching in the cranial lectures, I'm doing how the brain works, how the cranial bones works, how the cranial fluid works, all the time it means that the bones of the cranium and face and spine are articulating and moving, and that the energies are travelling through. And I think a lot of my job is to teach how it comes through the throat, how it comes through the brain, because globally, to me, it stops here. People's breath is here. It's not going through here. But as soon as this is all breathing, it is going through there. And at some point, that will awaken. So I think that is a lot of the teaching of holographic breathing. So you might be getting into something you don't want to, I'm not sure. But for me, holographic breathing is powerful, and as powerful as you want. You know, a lot of people are just doing it for relaxation and sporadically. That is absolutely fine, but you can take this to any level you want, and it is not just a breathing thing to relax or a breathing thing to do this or that. For me, holographic breathing is truly a transcendent breathing system, and physically and energetically interactive system that works on all levels and works spiritually as well, and will connect you to the higher realms, and will connect you to the earth, and will teach you how the energy moves through the brain. So you are no longer that. You are no longer the identity. You're no longer the intellect. It is still there, it's still working, but you're not identified with it in the way you were before. And as that happens, you get a whole different access to a whole different area that for me I had no idea even existed. And as it moves through the brain, I just thought, it's like having a house and suddenly you realize you've got a whole extra floor that you didn't know existed before. And my images of before would be that, oh, it's very spiritual, or it's very high energy. It's not like that at all. It's very grounded, and it's integrated into the whole body. There's a real physicalness to it as it goes through there. But you start seeing your own mind, you start seeing your own intellect, because you are no longer it. When the energy goes through on that level, you are no longer that you have always been. And as I say, for me, that was a terrifying experience. I thought something has gone terribly wrong. Really terribly, terribly wrong. And either I'm going to die or I'm going to end up in a lunatic asylum. And it was so painful. My only thoughts were, if this carries on for more than a week, I'm going to top myself, because this is just too terrible to be with. Then luckily I didn't do that, and the thought was, well, if you kill yourself, it's not going to cure anything. You know, you're still going to have to deal with it next time, or when you die it's going to be amplified. So you may have ruined your whole life, You may have ruined all the work you've already done, but all you can do now is spend the rest of your life integrating and learning how to be with whatever thing has happened. But within me, I also knew, however terrible it felt, that actually it was probably a spiritual event. And what kept me in that was that I could feel, as I allowed the energies to go through there, my spine was straightening. All the bits in my spine that had been held before, as it got as terrible as it felt, they would release. As it got more scary, they would release more. I would spend, and I had I had what everybody else thought I'd gone nutty, but I had one friend and therapist I'll go with to her for sessions, and she would journey with me and say, yeah, look, this is happening. I said, you can feel that? She said, yeah. And she said, this is happening, that. And she made me let it be okay. And in that situation, if you know anybody who starts going through that, the key to going through it is that it's okay. Once you can be with it and say, it's okay, this is actually meant to be. This isn't some big, terrible, energetic mistake that's gone wrong. That it's actually gone right. And if you can convey that to them in any way, that is a really helpful thing. Because as soon as you know it's right, or can allow it to be right, then you can start processing it, then you can start being with it. But you really do move into a new life when it happens on that level, and you can never go back. Once that door opens, finished, because everything was there before. It goes away. So you couldn't go back if you wanted to. And Osho, a teacher, I was with Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, or Osho, for a long time, and still am. You know, you never really. I always remembered in some of his lectures, he said, there's a point. Now, I'm not saying I'm enlightened. I don't think I'm enlightened. I haven't gone beyond all these different ways people describe things. I still get angry. I still get upset about things. I still feel anxiety and things like that. But I am different to how I was before. And he said, when the Ajna chakra opens, which I think happened, the Ajna chakra happened, but also the crown chakra is opening as well, because the energy was going home. You think you've gone insane. And I think, and he says it takes 3 or 4 years to let that go through. And I think that is what happened to me, because it's hard to believe you haven't gone insane when that happens. And you do process every part of the mind. You do process every part of internal insanity. Because suddenly you're in a space where you can view it. You are it before, so you can't view it. But once the energy goes through and just carries on going through, you drop back from that slightly. You're no longer enamored with it. You're no longer it. So you continually being aware of your own intellect, your own state of identity. So anyway, I didn't expect to go off on that, but so I include that when I'm teaching the holographic breathing, and I encourage it now, because I see it as a way that one, people can transform and powerfully, but also at the moment I really want to help the earth. And I think this does, if people drop into this state or move towards this state, then automatically that starts helping the earth. We can be the true guardians that we're meant to be, rather than people that just kind of seem to rape and pillage the earth and plunder it for everything we can get. So yeah. I'll bring out the next newsletter over the next week, and I'll put in the webinars for the new year. I'm going to do a free one. I did the last one on the cranial fluid, which is really good. If you that's got, I don't know how many, about 3 hours of meditations, because that's 3 different webinars put together, and teaching how, well, my view of how the cranial fluid works. And also I did a lot of work and found out how the myelin sheath, or the myelinating glial cells, make rivers for the cranial fluid, and I describe how that happens, so it can spread out through the whole body. And in that I teach that, and we're going to do some of that in the next one, but I'm also going to refer back to how it's shown generally, which the image of the cranial fluid, which for me actually shuts down everything I've been talking about. That image closes down the possibility of the energies running through the brain and cranium. The actual image, well, I don't know that it stops it, but it certainly doesn't help it. But if you view it all as one fluid, the fluid around the cranium and the fluid, around the brain and the fluid within the brain as one fluid and flowing out through the nerves, which I truly believe it does, then you get an unbroken continuum of water and dissemination of light through the whole central nervous system and out through the nerves, and you get all of the fluid flowing in that direction as well, and that aids the whole process of the light traveling through the brain, the consciousness traveling through the brain. And I spent a good 2 or 3 years just investigating that, because I didn't know the geometry of the brain or the anatomy of the brain. And I had no idea how it was going out through the nerves. I could just feel it in myself. And through going deeply into the anatomy, I thought, well, it can do that. It can travel in this way. And I had to paint pictures of it all, because there wasn't anything in the anatomy books that showed it that way. And I thought, you know, I want paintings where I can show it. And I didn't paint anything but I painted all of these pictures of the anatomy so I could teach it. And I started making the first set of videos of that through 2012, that was. Just from the very beginning of doing holographic breathing, it just worked like that, and I had to drop the old image, because if I held the old image, how it's taught in the anatomy books, I couldn't breathe. I certainly couldn't do holographic breathing. And when I allowed this new image, I could feel my whole brain detoxing, I could feel the Lyme's disease releasing and getting better. But I finished the last painting and I started doing these videos, and I was just editing one of the videos and describing how it moves, not just through the cranial fluid but through the neurons. And this energy just started pouring through my brain, the likes of which I've never felt in my life. And that's when it started, and I went outside and I went walking and I was breathing really hard. It'll be all right, it'll go away by the morning. And it never stopped. It just got worse and stronger. And about a week later, it was the Winter Solstice 2012, which is the solstice everybody said that everything's going to change on, was the 12th of the 21st of the 12th, 2012. And I'd poo-pooed it. I just said, no, the Mayans will just bring out a new calendar. It won't be the end. But for me, everything changed on that solstice. I was just sitting on the top of I was living in a van. I'd lost everything. I was living in a van. I still live in a van. I'd lost my money. I'd lost my health to Lyme's disease, and I sitting on top of Ivanhoe Beacon with this stream of light coming out of my head right up through the clouds and just turning into fire. Oh my God, what has happened to me? But there you go, I'm still alive. But anyway, yeah. So anybody who knows any cranial practitioners or anybody interested in that webinar, please let them know, because I think giving them, if they've been taught how it's shown in the medical books. Now, I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but for me, one is detrimental and the other one helps. So to change the image, and we will be not just, this time I won't just be showing my image. We'll go back over and show how it's shown, and I'll just by putting some basic fundamental laws of how the cranial fluid works, how anatomy works, how physiology works. That whole image, as it's shown, is for me just totally ludicrous and impossible. So we'll be going through both.